Hey guys, Shalana here. Welcome to the Binge Zone. On today's video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the mind of Joe Goldberg from You Season 1 to get a better understanding of who Joe is, how his mind works, why does he do the things that he does, so we can all get a better understanding of his sociopathic mind. But before we dive too deep into Joe Goldberg, guys, if you like what we do here, consider subscribing to our channel, following us on Twitter, and if you guys want more content like this, more breakdowns, more reviews, more recaps, consider becoming a Patreon because we could really use your support to keep this channel going strong. But without further ado, let's dive into the sociopathic mind of Joe. You is the story of a proletariat's bookstore manager named Joe Goldberg and his obsession with an inspiring writer named Beck and the irreprehensible ways in which he uses to win her love. The way Joe works is he psychoanalyzes people down to their most constituent parts, but with a purpose, because Joe can now use this method to create an ideal self that would be worthy of receiving love. And this is what makes Joe the most manipulative, is the ability for him to study his victim, study his target, see what they like, what they dislike, and kind of mold himself into becoming a reflection of what that person is looking for, what that person needs in their life, therefore getting an in with that person, and therefore getting even closer to the person and kind of never giving the individual a choice to meet the real Joe and like the real Joe. And the reason Joe does this is because love is the ultimate form of self-validation, and he did not get that self-validation from his former girlfriend who cheated on him. So by creating a whole new self, Joe can at the very least vicariously get the self-validation that he so desperately craves. So in other words, because love is the ultimate measure of yourself, as an individual, Joe needs that validation. And by getting cheated on, he kind of felt like he did everything correct for his last girlfriend, but she didn't reciprocate or give him that validation. So by molding himself to the reflection of whatever his next target, in this case Beck, needs, he in fact becomes the very thing that she loves the most, as opposed to her loving Joe. He becomes the stand-in for her love, therefore getting that self-validation, even though it comes at a cost of her not actually validating himself, but validating her own likes with it reflected on herself. And that kind of plays with Joe as the individual as well, because Joe in turn doesn't love the person that he's obsessed over, because the entire first season his obsession was with Beck. However, instead of loving Beck, Joe deconstructs herself in order to construct his self. Joe reduces Beck to a series of perceived personalities, i.e. her own character traits. She is embarrassed to be the good girl. She doesn't want to be all good. Anything she doesn't post online is real. She falls for the wrong men that she lets hurt her. She is blind with love for people that will never love her back. She gives. She's a true romantic, special, talented, passionate, practical. She needs someone to save her. These are the things Joe sees in Beck, as opposed to seeing her own mind, her own mental space, or just who she is. These are observations he made to categorize Beck. So instead of looking at her as a person, he looks at her as a series of things that she lacks or that she is looking for, as opposed to who she is as a person. Because all these things he categorizes her as are parts of what make her Beck, as opposed to these are the things that are Beck. And Joe is able to do this by investigating and figuring out who Beck is through the most impersonal of ways. He investigates who Beck appears to be through her social media accounts. Because her profile is set to public, she wants to be noticed. Her parents are divorced when she was 12. She's from Nantucket. She is getting her MFA. Address is posted online. So because of these banal things that she posts online, that gives him a reflection of who she is. However, as we know, whatever persona you post online isn't necessarily who you are, but a projection of the things you would like. So Joe doesn't really mold himself to be the person that Beck needs, but the person that she portrays to need or the portrays to be on social media, therefore never really quite understanding that the Beck that he's obsessing over never truly exists. But Joe does get a better idea of who Beck is by interacting with her friends who don't really support her. Beck needs to work for a living. She's a TA and she teaches yoga. Beck is alone in life, and given the friends that she has, she's also broke. So that is essentially the character arc of Beck, and that's how Joe breaks her down. That's how Joe deconstructs the very human that is Beck to get these banal points to kind of configure an alternate Beck. So that's why throughout the season, when she's doing things that he doesn't quite understand, like with the psychologist, he can't seem to wrap his head around, this is not Beck. It is. It truly is Beck. However, because he has a constructed version of Beck and then there's the actual Beck, he can't really differentiate the two. He's in love with the construction that he created as opposed to the real being that is Beck. So when Joe goes to construct this ideal self, Joe must manipulate his way into being a white knight that helps her when she needs it. Like when Joe helped her get and put together a bed that she needed by basically spying on her right outside her home. By creating this persona, he's white knighting. He's essentially everything she needs. If she's home alone and she can't put a bed together, Joe's gonna show up. If she needs something done and she has no one to help her and Joe magically shows up to help her by spying on her and stalking her, he becomes, wow, this guy's super convenient. He's always there for me, as opposed to being a regular dude that would be given a chance to court Beck if he wasn't such an imposing figure on her life. Beck must also see on her own what Joe says to be true in order to help build a better idea of Joe in her mind. For instance, when Peach is trying to sabotage Beck's writing career by setting her up to fail. And Peach is another interesting character because Peach also has an obsession with Beck, but she realizes she needs Beck's dependency on her to keep their relationship thriving. But Joe, on the other hand, doesn't want Beck to be codependent on him. So in his sociopathic mind, he sees that everything that Beck has as an obstacle is a threat that must be removed. And throughout the season, he begins removing obstacles from Beck's life. And he finds some justification for this because in his mind, killing Benji was necessary, not only because he was everything that was wrong for her, but because he could still always return to her life, which would impede any progress to have Beck in Joe's life. Killing Peach, on the other hand, was also necessary because not only was she representative of everything that Joe could not give Beck because of his socioeconomic status, but because Peach was also a rival opponent in the common obsession that is Beck. So here you have two love interests or potential love interests for Beck in the case of Peach, and both of them offer something that Joe cannot offer. Something about Benji kept Beck coming back, so he took her out. And because Joe's a proletariat, he could never compete financially with Peach, who was also Beck's best friend, as well as someone who has a lot of money. So she had two things up on Joe, and Joe ends up eliminating her and killing her, justifying that this is what needs to be done to protect Beck. However, again, he doesn't know who the real Beck is. This is everything he needs to get the ideal Beck that he has constructed in his mind. And one final obstruction was breaking up with Karen. Because in Joe's mind, breaking up with Karen was necessary as well because that self that Joe made was not tailor-made for Karen as it was for Beck. Because it was built on the believed understanding of whom Beck was on the inside throughout, as well as the obvious reason because Joe couldn't be with Beck if he was already with someone else. So again, Joe had a chance to move on and have a relationship which was nothing wrong, but because he didn't construct Karen, he didn't construct who she was, it was unfulfilling to him because he is sociopathic in that way that he must build up this idea of who you are and what you need, and he also creates a self that must fill the need of his own creation. So in turn, it's not that he loves Beck, it's the fact that he needs the self-validation in himself, so he creates something to validate himself, even though he truly doesn't validate his real self and he truly doesn't understand who the real Beck is. The main reason that all this has a falling out at the end is the fact that the main reason Joe's plan failed was because of Joe's true self, which is self-destructive in nature and inadvertently causes his newly constructed self to crumble. Joe's true nature can't help but rear its ugly head. His controlling, manipulative ways, even though he's in a relationship with Beth, however unhealthy it is, his compulsiveness must always come out, and even though he has this image that he tries to maintain, the real him, the manipulative him, the crazy him, the sociopathic him, his true self always rears its head and kind of puts a strain on the relationship that he tried so hard to fake through with Beck. A lesson to be learned here is that a person's true self will always come out no matter how hard one tries to hide it. As cliche as it sounds, Joe would have had better luck if he just tried to find someone who loved him for who he was and not try to be someone else. Because by being someone else, you can never truly be yourself, and the person who you're with or who you're in love with doesn't love you for you, but loves you as a construct of whatever they're missing in their life. In Beck's case, it's a construction that doesn't reflect who she is anyway. So in the long run, the love that he thought he had with Beck didn't exist. And whatever love Beck had for him did not exist as well, because both these two characters do not know each other. They do not understand each other. And that's because of Joe's manipulative ways. He created a self that is not really him, and he created a Beck that isn't really her. And he's in love with the creations of who he wants Beck to be, as well as he wants Beck to be in love with the creation of who he created for her. But in true love fashion, you have to love each other for who you are and not your self-creations. And Joe never quite understood this. So I'm curious to see how this translates in season 2 of You. But anyway, guys, that's my thoughts into the mind of Joe. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of this video. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And guys, if you want to have a more direct line of communication with me to deeper dive into Joe's mind, consider following me on Twitter, hitting me up and asking me these questions. That way I can see them much better than I would see a YouTube comment. And guys, if you guys like what we do here, also consider joining our Patreon, because with your support, we would really take off and give more videos, more amazing content to you guys and for your enjoyment. So guys, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and until next time, binge on.